Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has Frieza and Goku potential in Dragon Ball. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Juubi no Shinju and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Prologue Part 1. The Last Sun. Throughout the far reaches of the universe, many different planets laid in the stars, each inhabited by strange and unique species. Some races who wield great power or immense knowledge of sciences or mystical arts. Many races have been labeled throughout the galaxy as being strong and feared, though only a few have become the most powerful, with great warning to flee at the sight of them. One of them being a race of great and brutal warriors. A race who thrive on the fight, savoring every battle, not caring if they live till the end or not. The Saiyans. Humanoid beings who hold great strength and power, with their only unique differences from normal humans being their brown monkey-like tails. Once barbarians who live and die for battle. Residents of the planet Vegeta, led by a king whose name put into the planet. Focusing merely on primal instincts after the animals they are base of, barely using technology of any sort. For centuries, they fought and conquered many planets for the thrill of the battle, seeking victory and to prove themselves the strongest race in the galaxy. Soon, however, they made an alliance with a galactic emperor named Frieza, who sought to use their mighty strength and power for his army, gaining control of more planets. With the alliance, the Saiyans grew in technology and wisdom, but still favored their strength above all. As time passed, the Saiyans proved to be quite powerful, with more and more fighters with great potential appearing. Soon, even Frieza became concerned over their potential. Fearing that the Saiyans would one day rebel against him. Especially given the prophecy of the Saiyans. The Saiyan shall arise. One with powers so great and fur as bright as the sun. A golden Saiyan who shall contain immense power to destroy all that stands in its way, with no obstacle to stop it. A Super Saiyan never before seen, who overcomes the wall which no warrior, no matter how gifted, can overcome. Frieza would have merely brushed the story off as a false tale, but quickly recalled something important. Something passed down his family for generations. His ancestor, a space pirate named Chilled, had met his death at the hands of a powerful foe. His last words being, "Beware the blonde Saiyan." He had met, fought, and died by the hands of the Saiyan feared by his family. The legendary Super Saiyan. But that warning, with a foreboding chill on his spine, Frieza kept a very close eye on the Saiyans. But as he witnessed their rise in power, he knew he had to do something. He only had one thought. He had to destroy the Saiyan race. The fool would never realize the tragic mistake such a decision would have in store for him, or his death by karma. Meanwhile, far away from the soon-to-be-destroyed planet, a lone Saiyan attack ball sailed fast through space, making quick haste toward Planet Vegeta. Its pilot let out a cringe of pain as she held her side to cover up the bleeding gash. Her blood splattered and dripped over the chair and walls, but she didn't care about that. Her large mane of spiky black hair glittered in sweat and fresh blood, some not hers. Earlier, during her mission, she had been contacted by her idiot brother. At first, she thought he was going to brag about accomplishing another assignment like usual, only to be proven wrong. What she heard made her blood run cold in horror, before burning in fury. Frieza. That bastard. She couldn't believe it. After years of servitude to that bastard, he decides to get rid of the Saiyans just like that. She knew they couldn't trust that bastard. They'll pay. To make things worse, just as she and her team were about to head back to their ships, one of Frieza's top elite, the Ginyu Force, attacked them on Frieza's orders. Her team was massacred. And she just barely was able to escape. Now if she didn't get something to stop the bleeding soon, she'll either die or go unconscious. Just then, her pod's alarm went off, making her curse. As she was escaping the planet, those assholes fired after her, hitting and damaging the ship. Checking her computer, she saw that the navigation system had temporarily suffered an error and made auto course change, making her punch the top of the monitor in anger. She bit back a bark of pain as her wounds pulsed in pain. Her vision began to go hazy, no matter how hard she tried to stay awake. It was no use, as her vision began to darken. Cursing, she had just enough time to see the planet she was landing on. A bluish planet orbiting a large red sun. Soon, Nanban, older sister of Bardock and top female Saiyan of the Saiyan army, lost consciousness. Planet Krypton. The world where the people focus more on the side of science and technology. Buildings as high as the stars and made of metal, and the air filled with flying vehicles. Cities that stretch on for miles, and residents of scientists, doctors, physicians, men and women of discovery. Krypton was a planet and home where the discovery and advancements of scientific lands were developed centuries, eons even, far beyond its side and neighbors of the cosmos. So many discovered have been made. Laws of nature experimented with, broken, and modified. Diseased from many lifeform planets cured and manufactured. Even the aging process had been delayed through patience and studying. Perfect cloning, life creation, and life in pure energy have been made. Sure, there were a few wars, but they were easily taken care of through meeting and agreements. Once upon a time, at the early rising of its life, Krypton used to be an expanding empire, conquering other planets for years, but through leadership of the younger generation, peace prospered in its place, leading the race through a golden and peaceful age. But soon, its peaceful age would get shaken up as coming down from the sky, a strange missile crashed down close to Krypton's capital city, Kryptonopolis. The militarized forces of Krypton went to check it out, led by General Zod. At the sight, they stared in wonder at the large metallic sphere that laid in the middle of a large crater. It looked like a space pod used for one-person space travel, but they'd never seen one of that design. Some wondered if it came from another planet, making others wonder if it was a sign of war or an invasion. Cautiously approaching the pod, it took the scientists with them a few minutes to get the hatch opened. Once it was, weapons drawn, they looked inside. They gasped in shock and surprise when they saw a heavily damaged woman lying unconscious at the seat. Quickly grabbing her, they made their way by transport back to Kryptonopolis for medical assistance, while Zod called in a carrier to pick up the pod. They were able to get her to the medical center fast enough, and doctors were able to heal her injuries, which astonished them at the extent of her damage. Broken bones, ribs, and fractured skull were but the minimum of the damage. They were able to fix her cuts and gashes by using the special healing fluid, healing the cuts in seconds. It was then that the doctors noticed her brown tail. Taking this news to the scientists, who had knowledge on nearly every species in the galaxy, it was shocking to discover that the woman they saved was a Saiyan. One of the most dangerous and destructive races in the universe. That caused some panic over the small group who were with her. They all knew about the fearsome Saiyans. Just one is enough to conquer or destroy a whole planet. That is why they were marked in galactic records as Class A planet busters, with a flee at all costs on sight's warning. Luckily, the woman was unconscious, drugged with medicine to keep her knockout for a long while, enough to sort this out. When the news of the discovered Saiyan reached the ears of the ruling council, there was a heavy debate on what to do with her. Many called for her death, fearing the rampage from one of the battle-hungry monkey on their peaceful city. The few peaceful councilmen argued against it and instead insisted on speaking with the Saiyan and hopefully make peace. They knew that even though their civilization was advanced in the technology welfare and had a strong military force, they weren't invincible. Making an alliance with the Saiyans would be a change they'd be stupid to miss. After much shouting and arguing back and forth, the council finally came to a decision. They would keep the Saiyan woman under constant watch, as well as put titanium cuffs on her, though they wondered if it would be enough to hold her and cautiously approach her. It was a few days before the unconscious woman woke up, shocking the doctors, as with her injuries, she should have been unconscious for nearly 2 weeks, even with the healing fluids. Needless to say, as soon as she awoke, the hospital had to be quickly evacuated. Why? Because even if she was handcuffed, Nanban, the strongest female Saiyan of her generation, showed them that a Saiyan should never be underestimated. It was proven by her using her feet to lift up the bed she was in and kicking it through wall. She gave primal roars of anger as she went about destroying equipment and knocking guards back while demanding answers on where she was and where her ship was. Even then they used laser guns, she merely either blocked them with her cuffs, dodged them, or slapped them away easily. It took almost 2 hours to calm her down, whereas 85% of the center was destroyed, but before anything else could damage, the lead scientist stepped up to her with a promise to set her free if she calmed down. While reluctant to trust this man and very suspicious of these people, Nanban agreed. With her calmed and unrestrained, she was taken to the council chamber to see the ruling council. However, having the Saiyan impatience and unruly attitude, the first thing she said as she stepped into the room was a demand to know where her ship was. Seeing that the councilmen were angry at being talked to like that, it was the scientist with her who responded. He told her that her pod was found very damaged, and while the computer system might function if repaired, the navigation was of no use. She was stuck there. Angry, she demanded to use any spacecraft they had, but was denied by the council. They said that as she was an uninvited trespasser to their land, they had the right to hold her prisoner, further enraging her. With a roar, she sprung forth her aura and energy, making the chamber and city itself shake at the power she possessed. However, she was stopped by the man, who placed a hand on her shoulder, sending her a warning glare. Calm yourself, or you'll make things worse. Scoffing, she powered down, crossing her arms with a huff. She still demanded to see her ship. The man, not wanting to cause another quake of anger, agreed, ignoring the council, who shouted in protest. Leading her way, he took her to the science department, where her pod was laid at the bottom levels. Once she got to her ship, she went straight to her communication, hoping it was not too late. She saw she had a message from her brother, Bardock. He told of how he was going to see if he could warn the other Saiyans in time and hopefully put a stop to Frieza. He also said that he saw his son, Kakarot's pod leave the planet. Being sent off to a planet named Earth or something. He talked about that if he couldn't stop Frieza, he'd rather go down fighting, like a true Saiyan. That was the last she heard of her idiot brother. A sense of dread went through her. She didn't know how, but she knew. Bardock was gone. Her family was gone. Along with Planet Vegeta. Nanban held back tears of pain and loss. Most Saiyans didn't care for things such as love or family, given that they would send their children at birth to other planets to conquer. But her family was different. They loved each other, from mother and father to son and daughter to grandparents. Her family believed that such bonds are what made one strong. Stronger than those who only fought for themselves. She was happy Bardock found love with Jain and had a son. Nanban was a prideful woman who wouldn't just settle with just any man. She wanted someone who could stand her fury head on and actually stand up to her. Behind her, seeing her sadness, the man approached cautiously and placed a hand on her shoulder. Telling her she was sorry for her loss. Nanban, and perhaps her nephew Kakarot, were perhaps the last remaining Saiyans in the universe. With no home to go to and nowhere to travel to, Nanban was given residence on Krypton on the warning that she not do anything, meaning she could not hurt anyone or cause destruction. She would have scoffed but was too into her sadness to do anything. Her race was gone, along with her home planet. Her family and comrades dead and she had no idea where her nephew was or where this Earth planet was. The man, who she had learned called Jor-El, had helped her grieve for her fallen brethren. That was nice of him even if he was a dork. She was given residence in his family's large mansion. Apparently this House of El was some kind of big deal, like the Saiyan royal Vegeta family. Though staying in this planet was a bit too boring for her. All the technology around made her scoff. She was a proud Saiyan. All she needed were her fists and a face to punch. The only technology that was even interesting to her were scouters, attack balls, and flushable toilets. All else were just useless junk. Though she would reluctantly admit that these televisions, science, and weaponry were a bit interesting. Though the military forces were a bit pathetic, she had a good time beating the crap out of them, using the soldiers as sparring targets. All in all, the place a peaceful, which was both a good and bad thing for her. Good because she could relax, bad because there wasn't much to do. Beating Kryptonian soldiers could only be fun for so long. So, she took a job of traveling to other planets for research, but mostly to fight other opponents. Meanwhile, she spent her time mostly with Jor-El, as other people mostly got on her nerves, especially that warmonger, General Zod. That guy could get on her nerves, always demanding that she teach his soldiers how to use the energy of Kai to get stronger. While she was always eager for the chance to fight strong opponents, Zod reminded her too much of those idiot primal Saiyans and Frieza's men who lust for killing any living thing they believe are weak. It left a bad taste in her mouth thinking about that types of Saiyans. True Saiyans fight not for destruction but for the glory of battle. They fought for the sake of fighting and growing stronger. Those who did otherwise dirtied the great and proud Saiyan race. And Frieza. That bastard. She would make him pay for what she did to her race. One way or another. Anyway, she found that Jor-El was a good companion. Even though he focused more on science and inventing, making she scoff, she found out he was actually an ex-military soldier and fighter, much to her Saiyan happiness. He was nowhere near as good of a fighter as her, but had experience. She very much enjoyed beating the snot out of him in their spars, laughing as he laid on the ground. Though, she would often hear him mutter something about being able to match her if I was under yellow sun, whatever that meant. And so, years passed, and she actually grew closer to the admittedly handsome Kryptonian scientist, and before she knew it. Ah. Jor-El, you bastard. If I make it out of this alive, you're dead. Arg. Nanban screamed as she was feeling pain pulse through her whole body as she laid on a bed in a special medical center built away from Kryptonopolis. Made just for this occasion. Her roars shook the whole building as her power went out of control as she was trying to focus on the process of giving birth to her child. Beside her, Jor-El had to prevent tears of pain from falling out of his eyes as both his hands were being broken by the mighty strength of his wife. Female Saiyan strength plus female strength who was giving birth equals completely crushed hands. Ouch. The doctors were running all over the place, dodging falling selling debris and shaking floors as they tried to help with the birth. The day was a special day. It was the birth of the first even Saiyan Kryptonian hybrid in existence. A race of great power and strength, added with the intellect of the Kryptonians, the potential was nearly limitless. AHHH. Nanban screamed loaded as the doctor told her to keep pushing. Oh, how she wanted nothing more than to blast that idiot. What the hell did he think she was doing? AHHH. Her aura bursted out of her in her state, destroying any and all electronics around her. Light bulbs bursted from above, making the nurses quickly use the special crystals gathered that glowed in the dark. "Come on, Nanban. Almost there." Jor-El encouraged, handing his lover a steel bar to hold as his hands were currently useless, though the bar was quickly snapped in half, making the man cringe. "Arg. You damn brat. Get out of me right now." The Saiyan ordered as the bed's leg soon broke, making the bed fall, as well as the ground around her crack. If anyone had a scanner to read her power level, the device would have bursted, as the power of a mother giving birth would be unlike anything else. Suddenly, just when the shaking suddenly increased in volume, it lowered before disappearing in all. Everything was silent for a few minutes before a sound echoed through the building. The sound of crying. The baby's crying. Nanban, panting heavily in exhaustion, sweat layering her forehead, gave a tired smile, eyes stinging as tears threatened to fall. Jor-El was the same, as both newly named parents gazed down at their crying child. As with all Saiyan newborns, the child, a boy, already had a head of small black hair. It had a bit of spikiness, similar to his mother. His skin was a soft light brown tan, equal to his father. His mouth was wide as he gave a fierce cry, making his mother smile proudly at how loud it was. It was a warrior's cry. A Saiyan cry. His arms were slightly larger than a normal baby's given his Saiyan genes, having even the slightest tone of muscle that no newborn should have, and fingers twitched as they slowly clenched and unclenched. Swinging beneath the toddler, a monkey tail sways wildly, testing out its functions. Its fur, unlike the usual Saiyan brown, was a dark red. Nowadays, most Kryptonian children were born through the Kryptonian growth chamber, a technological chamber designed to artificially grow Kryptonians. It also allowed to genetically modify a genetic registry of citizens yet to be born, so they would fulfill specific roles in Krypton society. Such a thing made Nanban and Jor-El sick, as there was no love in the birth, and it basically robbed the children of their society of choice and change. Even pre-Saiyans, before Frieza came along, gave birth to their children and trained them personally with pride. Only a handful of children were born naturally, like their son. The nurse picked the baby up to clean, wrapping its surprisingly warm body in a red blanket that had the House of El crest on it, a shield with an S in the middle in gold. Once clean, she handed him to Nanban, expressing her congratulations. Though the Saiyan barely heard her, merely keeping her loving gaze at her son, who sensing his mother's touch, opened his eyes for the first time. Cold black eyes blinked at the new vision before looking up at the smiling face of his mother. Blinking, the new hybrid giggled as he reached his arms up to her face, making Nanban smile as tears slid down her face in happiness. Jor-El smiled at the two as he leaned closer, entering his son's vision, who reached up to him. Not caring if his hands were currently hurting, Jor-El gently rubbed his son's cheek, making the baby giggle more. Smiling at the family, the doctor stepped up. "I congratulate you too. He's perfectly healthy. If I may ask, what is his name?" Jor-El and Nanban looked at each other before looking down at their son. They had already picked up a name for him. "Naruto. His name is Naruto, of the House of El," Jor-El said. "Or Naruto, whichever you prefer," Nanban added, keeping her eyes looked on her son, who was looking around in wonder before he spotted his tail and cried when he grabbed it. Years have passed since the birth of the first even half Saiyan half Kryptonian child. Many were ecstatic at meeting the first being of a new species, though there were those who were disgusted at the news, such as the older generation stuck in the old ways. Those who believed that their blood was being stained by the fusion of a race as barbaric as the Saiyans. Thankfully, the Kryptonian guards, under the order of a few ruling councilmen who believed the child to be the future of their race, put a stop to any attacks. Raising a child with Saiyan blood had been a handful, as Nanban had explained that Saiyan newborns were very in tone to their primal instincts and had a very wild nature. Thankfully, Nanban had a way to put a stop to such antics with a light but strong fist to the head and a heavy glare in the eyes, daring Naruto to disobey her. The child was quick to go silent, making Nanban nod in satisfaction. No child of hers was going to rebel her. Not if she had anything to say about it. Though the future of Naruto was quite an argument. Nanban wanted him to be a fighter, like the proud Saiyan he was, while Jor-El thought he would do great as a scientist, having seen his great intellect for someone so young. Thankfully, Naruto had, unknowingly, put a stop to the argument when he approached them and said he wanted to be a fighter like his mama, but also a scientist like his papa. Both brain and brawn. With a glance, the two nodded in agreement. And so, when Naruto came to the right age to begin training, Nanban would exercise and work out with her son from early in the morning to noon, while Jor-El would have Naruto read and study beginners' books from noon to dawn. Having equal time to teach him his heritage parts. Naruto had also shown aspects of both his family sides. He could be brash and easily angered like a Saiyan, as well as eager to fight and get stronger, but also smart like a Kryptonian, always looking at things carefully and analyzing the choices given to him. He also liked to invent things, having many crazy but interesting ideas. He liked to pick fights like his mother, but was very loyal and protective to the friends he made, especially his family. And like his father, he hated being proven wrong, sometimes fighting about it, arguing until he corrected his mistakes. Though the trouble with raising Naruto was his Saiyan heritage with a full moon. And given that Krypton had 3 moons close to the planet, it was very difficult at times, given that Naruto could see the moons anytime with but a glance. So, the parents had to make his room with the windows facing away from the direction the moons rise. Jor-El would have been skeptic about the whole giant ape transformation had he had not seen Nanba go through it years ago and saw how destructive she was as she lost herself to her primal instincts, her will weak from the sadness at losing her planet and fierce anger at Frieza. And not to mention that Naruto was too young to learn how to control his instincts. But besides all that, they raised their son to be happy and healthy, while also making sure mostly Nanba to knock sense into him whenever he fell into the Saiyan greater than thou mood. Currently, Jor-El was making his way to his home, finishing his work and meeting with the Science Council. He had a thoughtful look on his face. Lately, he had been getting strange readings on strange tectonic plates around Krypton. He expressed his concerns and foreboding sense that something bad was going to happen to his teacher and partner, Non, and Brainiac, an artificial intelligent computer program created by the council to monitor Kryptons and work progress. Non had shared his concern, also having a bad feeling, but countless times Brainiac waved off their concerns and facts, stating it was probably nothing. Haven made calculations that the earthquakes were nothing. Oh, how he hated that infernal machine. For a system that held countless knowledge, it was a blind to the truth as a convert bat. Still, Jor-El thought as he narrowed his eyes, he was going to bring this to the council tomorrow. And he will make them see the truth. He soon arrived home as he entered his large home. Entering his living room, he smiled when he saw his son in the center of the large space, doing push-ups, while to the side, sat the family dog, Crypto, his son's best friend, Lara Lorvan, granddaughter of the Science Council head, Sulvan, and his cousin. Kara's Orel, his younger brother's daughter, watching the young hybrid train with Crypto in the middle. Over the years, Naruto had grown to be quite the young man. With his daily training and Saiyan heritage, Naruto had grown physically more than other kids his age. At the age of 6, his psyche was more than a child his age should have. He had some muscle in his arms, chest, and legs. Not enough to be buff, but enough to show his work and training. His midnight black hair had grown down to his shoulders and had a spiky and wild look like his mother, pointing everywhere like a mane, with a bang falling down between his eyes, slightly covering his right eye. His black eyes held warmth and kindness, as well as intelligence, but also an animal spark for battle. Showing the perfect balance between intelligent Kryptonians and battle-hungry Saiyans. He was wearing a one-piece black suit, the common wear for Kryptonians, with small red House of L crests in the shoulder and a larger one on the front. Wrapped around his waist was his tail. Acting as a belt to prevent many from touching the sensitive appendage and making Naruto feel weak, as well as pain. His mama told him that as he gets stronger, the weakness will disappear. He could faintly hear his son muttering 57, 58, 59, 60, making the scientist shake his head fondly at his son's love for training. If it wasn't for him, his son would train all day, like his mother. He looked at the viewers watching his son. Crypto was a white-furred dog, but held a high intelligence. Not enough to actually speak, but enough to understand human behavior and still act like a normal canine. However, Crypto was more of a wolf in some aspects, as it is able to make its fur razor sharp and even shift its molecular biomass to increase in size. Crypto was one of Krypton's unique species, founded by Nanban and taken into the family. His wife's excuse being he put up a good fight. Since then, Crypto's shown a fierce loyalty to Naruto, going wherever he goes and growling at anyone who approached the boy who weren't his friends. He looked next to Lana. The two kids met, then Sulvan was invited to dinner at his house and brought his granddaughter. At first meeting, the two became the best of friends and were almost inseparable. Lara had long black hair that went down to the middle of her back, well held in a tri-hook headgear, and seriously, what is that? And had light blue eyes. She was wearing black one-piece and a red cloth over front and back. Looking at her, Jor-El knew she would be quite a beauty as she got older. His wife even had a bet pool set up, betting that Lara and Naruto would hook up before they even reached their teen years. Lara was smiling as she watched her best friend train while scratching the top of Crypto's head. On Crypto's other side sat a young girl the same age as Naruto and Lara with long blonde hair and blue eyes. Kara was a miniature version of her mother with brighter blonde hair. Kara and her family, once residents of Krypton, lived on Argo, Krypton's sister planet and one of its moons. Centuries ago, there was a mighty explosion which caused Krypton to break apart. Argo was the result of one of the pieces being crafted. After that, many Kryptonians migrated there and made civilization, his brother and his fiancée being one of them. Her father and his brother, Zor-El, worked at the Argo Science Division, sharing the same science interest as him, while her mother, Kala In-Z, was Argo's chief physician. Like Lara, she and Naruto was almost inseparable, given that Kara actually showed interest in fighting, making Naruto always eager for a spar. Sitting on the couch, talking amongst themselves, were Sylvan, Zor-El, and Kala. Spotting him, they welcomed him home. Hearing this, Naruto put a halt to his training to look up. Seeing his father, he grinned widely and waved him at. Smiling back, Jor-El waved at him before heading to the kitchen as Naruto finished his push-ups before running out to the back to play, his friend, cousin, and dog following him. In the kitchen, Jor-El spotted his wife at the counter, cooking as she cut a large animal with a large knife. Given that the species on the planet were either dangerous to eat or under the Nature Protection Program, much to Nanban's disappointment, as some of the animals looked tasty, she had to travel to other planets to fetch food, mostly meat. Not much of Nanban has changed since she had given birth to Naruto. She constantly trained to keep herself fit as the whole stay at home and cook and clean every day wasn't for her. She cooked and took care of her some, but she mostly trained and kept herself fit. She was a fighter, damn it. She mostly hired maids or robots to take care of the cleaning, giving all attention to raising and training her son. Her hair was still the large spiky and wild black mane she called hair as it reached her waist. She wore a form-fitting black bodysuit and her old Saiyan armor which she repaired. Think of a dark pink version of Bardock's armor. Her tail waved around as she hummed happily while she stabbed down on the meat she cooked with a grin, making Jor-El cringe at the motion, recalling how she would threaten him with a butcher to his bits with a mad grin back when they would date if he did anything she didn't like or annoyed her. Nanba was a woman no one wanted to mess with, especially after she sent Zod flying into the atmosphere by a kick through the nuts after the general ordered Naruto be given to him. Elle bears no fury, like a mother's protectiveness over her child. Sensing her husband behind her, Nanba looked over her shoulder at him. "You're home early," she said before going back to cooking. Jor-El nodded as he took of his coat and placed it over the chair on the table. "Meeting ended early. Anything interesting happened?" he asked as he moved behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, planting a kiss on top of her head. Nanban gave a mirthful giggle. "Well, I started Naruto's Kai training, which by the way, he surprisingly hold quite a large amount and accidentally broke the windows at the east side of the house at the blast," she said, though not sounding the least bit sorry. In fact, she found the entire thing funny, making Jor-El sigh. His wife and son nearly drove him crazy with their outrageous antics and destructive nature. He couldn't count the number of times they broke something and he had to fix it. He didn't blame his son, as they were mostly done on accident. His wife on the other hand, he could never trust her alone after she nearly blew up the house after she failed in trying to kill a spider, as well as destroyed the old crop fields after she couldn't find anything to eat. The devil-like grin she would occasionally send him when she promised to be good didn't help her. He is slowly getting the ability to fly and calling forth his Kai, which is quite surprising as most Saiyan children are able to call their energy until days after summoning their Kai, Nanban said with a proud smile. Jor-El smiled as well, his son was quite the little genius. Planting another kiss on her head, he moved away and went to the fridge to grab a drink. Blinking, Nanban looked at him, sensing something troubling him. "Something wrong, nerd boy?" she asked, using the nickname she had given him when they first met. Jor-El's brow twitched slightly at the nickname. While he was a man of science and technology, the way his lover said it was as if she was mocking him. Rolling his eyes, he drank his drink before looking at her. "Nan and I discovered strange seismic activity within the planet's core. Though Vril Dox doesn't think much of it, I want to bring it to the council tomorrow." Blinking at the news, Nanban cleaned her hands and turned to face him. "You think it could be something serious?" she asked as she saw the look on his face. Jor-El shrugged. "Could be something, could be nothing. That's why I want to hold a meeting for permission to take caution and gather more data," he explained. Nanban nodded. "You think they'll listen? Those old sacks of bones are as prideful in their ways as a Saiyan and as ignorant to being wrong as you are. If you want, I could come and," pausing, she grinned wickedly as she punched her hand, encouraged them to listen to reason. She offered but pouted when Jor-El sent her a deadpan look and shook his head. "After you almost obliterated Councilman Van Ra's junk after he declined your offer to train the Kryptonian elite soldiers, you in the council chamber is the last thing anyone wants," he said, making Nanban cross her arms with a huff, muttering childishly about just trying to help. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, making the two go wide-eyed, but soon Nanban relaxed as Jor-El ran to the living room to check on the others, while the chuckling Nanban calmly walked behind him. Once the L house head made it to the living room, he saw everyone out in the backyard and ran to them. When he got there, his eyes widened in shock when he spotted the source of the shacking. Standing in the middle of the yard, Naruto was giving a strong roar as she took in a horse dance and was encased in a large blazing flame-like aura cloak of energy. The ground around him cracked from the pressure and powerful winds blasted out of the center of the force. Lara and Kara were holding on to a large crypto to prevent themselves from being blasted off. The adults were able to hold their ground, but just barely as they shielded their faces from the force. Around Naruto, pieces of the ground began to erupt upward and even levitate off the ground. Some of the bigger pieces even broke into smaller parts from the pressure. With a final roar, a large crater exploded from underneath Naruto, about a foot deep. Soon, Naruto took a deep breath as he pulled his energy back within him. Haven made a demonstration of his training to his friends. Sighing, he wiped the sweat that had gathered on his forehead before facing the crowd with a wide grin. "So, what did you think?" he asked the shocked group. The adults were slack-jawed as they stared at the young boy in shock, while the two Kryptonian girls snapped out of it and ran to Naruto, expressing how cool and powerful he was, making Naruto rub the back of his head sheepishly. Meanwhile, Nanban chuckled as she stepped next to the shocked parent's grandfather. "I told you Techno Boy, Naruto has quite a lot of Kai than most do at his age and was able to summon it quite quickly too. I'd say by the time he reaches his teen years, he'll be a force to be reckoned," she said with a wide and proud smile. Over time, she had learned how to raise her Kai levels even more, even hid them from enemies who could sense her level. Once she figured it out and trained on calling her Kai to increase her power, she taught her son. Oh, the destruction in battles her son will cause. Not to mention the future battles. Power attracted, so he'll no doubt fight many strong opponents. Not to mention, give her lots of grandchildren. Hey, power attracted, and not just opponents. Soon her Saiyan Ran will be rebuilt. Shaking his head, Jor-El looked around at the amount of damage the backyard was in, making him sigh. The consequence of having a family of Saiyans. Nanban seemed to know what her husband was thinking, and her grin widened. She loved giving her husband headaches. Anyway, I just came to let everyone know that dinner will be ready in a few minutes. So Naruto, go wash up. She told her son. The young Kryptonian Saiyan nodded. Okay, mama. He said before headed toward the bathroom as everyone else went to wait at the living room. Soon everyone was gathered at the table and ate. Though Sylvan looked at Naruto and Nanban in disgust as the two Saiyans were grabbing anything they saw and were stuffing their mouths. Well, Naruto was. Nanban had simmered down her eating habit slightly over the last few years. She still ate faster than a regular person, but not enough to send food flying. Naruto on the other hand, well, he was a pig. He was a beast. Well, he was a beast when it was just him and his parents. With company, he just ate fast enough that most would think he didn't chew his food. Jor-El sighed at his son. He sent a small glare at the amused Nanban. I blame you for this. You're a bad influence. His wife just sent him a peace sign. If he wasn't used to his wife's antics, he too would be disgusted at how his son ate. Kara rolled her eyes at her cousin as she ate delicately. Lara giggled at her friend as she also ate slowly. The others just tried to ignore what was happening. Soon, plates around Naruto were either empty or filled with bones as the dark-haired boy leaned back in his chair with a sigh of content as he patted his full and slightly bloated belly. Oh man. That was good food, mama. Nanban giggled. Thank you, my little monkey. Jor-El shook his head fondly with a small smile. His family might be wild and crazy, but he wouldn't have it any other way. Soon the guests left and the two parents put a tired Naruto to bed. After patting his head softly and kissing his forehead lovingly, they left for their room. Their room was a sort of bedroom workshop as there was an extra section to the side where the two either did their at-home work, Jor-El, or invented thing, Nanban. Stretching her back, Nanban walked toward the work side to check on something she had been working on for Naruto as a present for being able to go so far in his training. Once done, she floated toward the bed and flopped down. Stretching her whole body with a sigh, her wild hair spreading out. Tuckling at her, Jor-El went to the bathroom to take his work clothes off and freshen up. Once ready, he joined his wife and laid down as Nanban in one of her rare moments snuggled at his side. The two were in peaceful silence, reflecting the happy years that have come to them since their meeting and Naruto's birth. They had moments they would cherish forever and fight to keep. Their hybrid son had brought them so much joy and happiness, and they both knew that he would do great things. Be he a fighter or a scientist, they would always be proud of him. Kissing his wife on the cheek, making her cheeks go a faint red, the two laid down to sleep. After all, tomorrow was a big day. End of first part prologue. Just so you know, Jor-El's appearance is his Man of Steel counterpart. So, yeah. This is an idea I had for a while now, but never put down. I'll admit, this story was inspired after reading Uzumaki's son Naruto's A Half-Breed's Tale. The concept of a hybrid between a race of strength and fighting and a race of intelligence and inventing intrigued me. So I decided to give it a try. So yeah, Naruto's half Saiyan, half Kryptonian. And yeah, Naruto will meet his cousin Goku, just not anytime soon. I already have the plan of the story. You'll just have to wait and read to see what it is. Chapter 2. Lost Home. Jor-El let out an annoyed sigh, coming back from his meeting with the council. As his wife would put it, bunch of snivering bags of useless bones. He had gone to them to give his report. To make them realize the inedible. Krypton was dying. And it was going to go out with a bang. He had continued to tell them if they continued to use the planet's core for energy, they would drain the planet of life. He had offered them a solution. To grant Jor-El control of the Codex, the genetic registry of Kryptonian DNA, and send it along with him, Nanba and Naruto, along with other selected few to another habitual world to restart the Kryptonian race. He spoke to them, pleaded to them, to listen to reason. To accept his plan now while they still had time. But no. Like the dogs they were, they pushed aside his words and followed those of Brainiac. They would trust a machine more than their top scientist. All the facts presented to them by him, Nan, and Zor-El were completely ignored. He gritted his teeth in anger. Why? Why was Brainiac lying? He knew the truth. How could he not? He was built to monitor the planet's changes, and Jor-El knew the changes were due to the rising pressure and quakes of the planet's core. What would it take to make them see reason? Running a hand through his hair, giving a tired sigh, he entered his home. Making it to the living room, he looked up and saw his wife and son outside, working on the latter's training. He walked to the backyard, looking on at his son's progress as the young Kryptonian Saiyan hybrid fought his mother in a spar. With a cry, Naruto charged at Nanban, his right fist pulled back. Nanban watched this in a seemingly relaxed posture, a grin on her lips. Once he got close, her hand shot up, easily catching the thrown fist. Holding it tightly, she lifted her leg up and kicked her son in the stomach, sending him flying back. As he flew, before he could right himself, his mother appeared behind him and was sent flying up into the air with an uppercut. Jor-El watched, slightly worried, and hoped his wife and son didn't go overboard. Again. He sighed. Who was he kidding? In the air, Naruto gritted his teeth and flared his energy. Concentrating, he slowly come to a stop in midair. He had finally gotten flying down, though had a hard time keeping his concentration. At that moment, Nanba came shooting after him from below. This time he was ready. Crossing his arms, he blocked a hard punch from her and countered with a sidekick, which was blocked. Continuing his momentum, he threw a punch, which his mother parried to the side and countered with a punch of her own that he barely dodged. The two Saiyans moved in blurs as they threw punches and dodged or countered. When each punch connected, it would send loud pulses from the impacts. Though it was easy to see that Nanban was holding back much of her strength. Seeing this, it made Naruto angry, his Saiyan instincts appearing. With a growl, he threw a punch at her face. However, Nanban caught it. Smirking at her son, she began to spin around, taking him with her. Spinning like a top, she soon stopped and threw Naruto downward to the ground. Waving his arms wildly as he approached the ground, he quickly called up his Kai. He sighed in relief when he managed to catch himself inches from the ground. However, he was open to a surprise punch to his head as Nanban appeared. Jor-El watched as his son flew like a bullet and crashed hard into the side of the mountain near the house of El. He was glad they lived away from the city, or else he would get complaints if the two Saiyans took their fight to the city. Pushing himself off the mountain, only a bit of scratches on him, Naruto dusted himself off any dirt. Looking up, he saw his mother land across from him. She looked at him with a smirk, her eyes holding a challenging glint as she stood calmly with her arms crossed. Scoffing, Naruto stood up. The two Saiyans stared at one another, the wind blowing around them. From his porch, Jor-El moved to the edge, deciding to watch the incoming sparring match. Nanban stared at her son, before smirking. Well, now that our warm-up is finished, let's begin. Naruto nodded and settled into a battle stance. His legs spread apart, his body lowered and arms held in front of him and behind him, fingers curled. Nanban copied him as she got in her own stance. The wind blew around them as the two monkey-tailed fighters glared challenging at the other. The pebbles at their feet rumbled as their Kai slowly began to rise. Before Jor-El could blink, the two vanished. Pressure shocks appeared in the air, the man not able to keep up with their speed, only catching after images of them locking fists or blocking, before vanishing again. The ground shook and cracked from every impact and shockwave. His cloak rustled from the heavy winds blowing, yet he did not look away. But the battling duo, moving at the speed of sound, they exchanged blows with one another, though Naruto was pushing every ounce of his energy to try and keep up. Naruto on the offensive, throwing hard punches, which Nanban blocked or countered, throwing a few punches of her own. Naruto didn't even manage to land any hits, but received them instead, his mother's experience greater than his. He raised his arm up, blocking a side kick. However, the force behind the kick sent him shooting back down to the ground. As he flew, he opened his eyes, glaring back at his mother. Gathering Kai into his hand, he summoned up a sphere of red energy. Pulling his arm back, he threw it at her. Nanban saw this and smiled proudly at her son already being able to call up and use his Kai. Sure, it was not much or as powerful as what she had hoped, proven as she easily swatted it away like a fly, but it was enough. Smirking, she vanished. Before Naruto knew what happened, Nanban appeared above him and slammed down her feet on his chest, sending him crashing deep into the ground. Jumping back, she waited patiently for her son to get back up. That wouldn't finish him, after all, he was her son. Sure enough, the hole he was in was destroyed by a pillar of red energy. With a growl, Naruto got up, glaring at him. Mocking waving at him, Naruto growled and charging up his Kai, the energy blazing around him like a flame cloak like a comet, he charged at her, Nanban meeting it head-on. Jor-El sighed as his family continued to destroy and wreak the canyon. He really didn't need headache. Still, it put his mind off the meeting and brainiac for the moment. So grabbing a nearby chair, he sat down to watch the spar. Though he hoped Nanban would take it easy on their son and didn't lose control of her battle lust. A half hour later, a dirty, sweaty, and tired Naruto stood beside an equally dirty and sweaty, but grinning Nanban. Their clothes were in tears, looking ready to fall apart. They stood in front of sighing Jor-El. They did it, they actually demolished the mountains behind the house, and he had a feeling his wife took pleasure at not only doing so, but also giving him a headache. He would soon be getting gray hairs because of her. He looked at his son. "Naruto, go take a shower," he told him. Naruto nodded. "Okay, Dad." With a grin, he ran off to the bathroom. Jor-El then looked at his wife, whose grin widened as she crossed her arms under her bountiful chest, her armor taken off earlier. "You up for some dirty sex?" She purred out, making a joke on her current appearance. Her eyes sparked in lust at the idea. Jor-El rolled his eyes, though cheeks dusting a bit red. "No, maybe later. I'm not in the mood right now," he said and moved to the kitchen. Nanban looked after him with a worried frown. She could see that he was exhausted. More than usual. Worried for the man she had made a life with, she followed him. Entering the kitchen, she spotted him sitting on the table, a glass of liquid in his hands with a thoughtful look on his face. Making her way to him, she placed a hand on his shoulder, making the scientist look up at her. "Tell me what's wrong," she stated, her tone saying that she would not take no for an answer. Sighing, he gestured her to take a seat. Once she sat down, he told her of the meeting. Of how all his data he told the council was coldly rejected, how they simply went with what Brainiac said, like always. That made Nanban scoff. She never trusted machines, even more when they are sentient. She shivered. Living machines, it was a nightmare. She growled when Jor-El was done. "Ungrateful bastards. You try to save them and they just turn their heads. Makes me want to go over there and beat the stuffing out of them," she threatened. Jor-El put a hand on her shoulder to calm her down a bit. He was really grateful for having such a woman as a wife. Nanban trusted his work and research. She trusted his word on the impeding destruction of Krypton. Haven already lost her home once. She would do anything to ensure she didn't lose another. Jor-El cupped his chin. "What I can't understand is why Brainiac lied. He should know that my data is true, Krypton in danger of exploding," he said, making Nanban clench her fist. It was the same with Planet Vegeta, except instead of Frieza blowing it up, it was the unstable core. She could not lose another home. More than that, she couldn't lose her family again. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Jor-El sighed before raising his head, a determined look on his face. "I'm going to get answers. Tonight, I'll head to Brainiac's main server to confront him," he said. Nanban narrowed her eyes a bit and placed her hand on top of his. "Be careful. Brainiac practically runs the whole council and police force. No one would even think about going against his word if he frames you." Jor-El nodded. "I know the risk, but I have no choice," he muttered. Nanban frowned and held her husband's hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm right beside you," she said, making him smile at his wife. "Thank you, Nanban." "Whatever, nerd." An hour later, the family sat on the dining room table, eating their food. A large boar-like creature Nanban discovered, killed, and cooked that took about 3/4 of the table, enough for the fierce Saiyan appetite, while Naruto told his father about his day and how he was getting stronger. Crypto sat beside the table, chewing on a large steak. Jor-El nodded with a smile as he listened, occasionally laughing when the young boy told him about the time he snuck behind his mother and delivered a punch to her head. He remembered laughing the whole day as Nanban had a bump on the back of her head. Said woman grumbled about disrespectful brat as she chomped down on her meat. Suddenly, as they were eating, a knock came at the door. The two adults exchanging looks, Jor-El went to answer it. He was surprised to see Zod standing outside his house. "Zod. Is there something wrong?" he asked. He never knew Zod to see him in person, usually he would have one of his men fetch him. Zod looked at the scientist, his expression serious. "Jor-El, I must speak with you," he stated. Jor-El raised a brow at his serious. Well yes, the general had always spoken with a serious tone, there was something in this. Something he didn't know what it was. Nanbin then made herself appear as she approached the door. Seeing Zod, she shot him a glare, one he returned with a small one, making Jor-El sigh. He knew of the tension between the two, Nanbin seeing the general as a warmonger, while Zod saw his wife as a brute and savage monkey, always questioning the scientist's affection for her. Sparks began flying from the Saiyan and Kryptonian's eyes, clashing at the middle, making his sweat drop grow larger. He stopped them as he placed a hand on Zod's shoulder. Alright, Zod. Let's talk outside. He said and began leading the man out. Nanbin huffed before turning and heading back to the dining room. She had to get there fast before Naruto ate all the food. Damn Saiyan hunger. Outside, the two Kryptonian men looked up at the sky. It was nearing dawn. The two stood in silence for a minute, Jor-El waiting for Zod to say something. After a while, the general spoke. You're right, Jor-El. Zod, getting Jor-El to look at him in confusion. This planet is facing its final hour. And yet, the council does nothing to protect it. Zod's eyes held anger in them as he clenched his fists. Jor-El just looked on, confused on where Zod was going with this. It is time for a change. Zod said, his eyes sharpening. If our race is to survive, moves must be made. And what do you have in mind, Zod? Jor-El asked. Zod looked at him. If our race is to survive, the council must be eliminated. Jor-El's eyes widened at what the man was planning. You plan to kill the council, are you mad? If the council won't take charge for the prosperity of Krypton, they are useless. Zod stated. Jor-El glared at the man. You are talking about war, Zod. Right when Krypton is in its last day. It's madness. But Zod would not stand down as he matched Jor-El's glare. No, not a war, with time so short. A rebellion. We must take every precaution we can to ensure our race's survival. Jor-El narrowed his eyes at the general. What are you planning, Zod? Zod turned his head away from him, instead looking upon the large city of Kryptonopolis. The lights were beginning to get turned on, illuminating the upcoming darkness. In its centuries of thriving, our race has grown and evolved, bringing forth great strength and technology. Jor-El stayed silent. I am not a fool. I doubt many would so readily believe in our words about Krypton's destruction. As such, there is no time to get them to see the truth and evacuate. However, there is another way to ensure our race lives on. He said. Jor-El raised a brow in confusion. What was Zod hinting to? His eyes widened in realization. Zod couldn't possibly mean. Zod saw his look and chuckled. I see your smart brain figured it out as usual. Yes, in order for our race to begin anew, I plan to take those loyal the true Kryptonian way and leave this doomed planet. We shall take to the stars and start anew. In time, the glory of Krypton shall rise again. Jor-El glared at Zod. And what about the rest of our people? What about the men, women, and children? He demanded. Those young and strong will also be taken, as well as the females. We will need to repopulate our race, of course. Zod said as if it was simple to understand. Betting any, Jor-El grabbed Zod by the front of his uniform and pulled him close to his face, which held an angry expression. Is that all you care about, power, Zod? Our race is on the verge of being whipped out. All the more reason to bring down the council and gather the necessary forces to ensure the Kryptonian race's legacy. The general said, pulling himself off Jor-El's hold. Ignoring the scientist's glare, he turned back to the city, crossing his arms. I would have thought you'd immediately agree with my, Jor-El. Aren't you the one who demanded evacuation? Jor-El frowned. Well, yes. But I wanted to save those I could. Any man, women, and child. To keep our race living. All you wish to do is rise an army. That's madness. Zod interrupted him. No, it's survival. Our race has grown weak, Jor-El. I see that. Because of our foolishness, we have allowed the planet's core to become unstable. Using its energy for our own minimal desires. Our weakness must be eradicated, destroyed, and removed. It is time we leave behind the past of old and bring about a new future. A rebirth of the Kryptonians. One strong and full of power. He announced, making Jor-El narrow his eyes at his longtime friend. The words he spoke, they were wrong. Zod sought a future, not of peace, but of power. That was dictatorship. Zod glanced at Jor-El and seeing his expressing, sighed. You must look at the big picture, Jor-El. If our race is to survive any future threats, both internal and external, we must be strong. Turning to the man, he placed a hand on his shoulder. And not just our race, but that of your wife and son as well. That made Jor-El narrow his eyes at the general. Where was he going with this? As it is known, your wife as well as your son are amongst the last that remains of the Saiyan race, with only a handful left in the universe. As such, I would like you, your wife, and your son to come with me. I'm sure that with your son's Saiyan blood, we can make the next generation of Kryptonians powerful. That made Jor-El glare fiercely at Zod. Bastard was planned to use his son, his Naruto, his pride and joy, as a breeding stock for more Kryptonian Saiyan hybrids. He opened his mouth, about to yell angrily at the man, but before he could, the two had to hold on to something as suddenly, the ground, area, all of the planet, began to quake and shake tremendously. Oh no. Not again. Jor-El grunted as he held on to the railing as tight as he could. Inside the house, plates from the table, as well as furniture crashed down and tumbled over to the ground. Naruto gave a shout as he tried to keep his balance. He was quickly grabbed by Nanban, who held him in a tight protective embrace. Covering him with her larger body, she held still as debris from the roof sprinkled down on them. Narrowing her eyes, she made sure no harm of any kind hurt her child. After a minute or two, the quakes began to lower in intensity, before stopping completely. Sighing in relief, Nanban checked her son, making sure he was alright. Sighing he was alright, she breathed out in relief, before she narrowed her eyes. They're getting worse. Back outside, as the shaking stopped, Jor-El also had the same thoughts as he measured the quaking. It was stronger than the last one he had felt last month. It held longer too. We're running out of time. Standing up, Zod looked at the Kryptonian scientist. As you can see, Jor-El. Time is short. I will be making my move soon. Hopefully by then, you've made your decision. He said, and before Jor-El could say anything, Zod walked away. Standing in his spot in silence, Jor-El thought on what he should do. He had to face Brainiac, question him on why the computer continued to lie to the council. Not to mention the incoming destruction of Krypton. And now Zod wanted to wage a civil war with the council. Groaning, he ran his hands through his hair. What should he do? It was a half hour later that Jor-El and Nanban stood in front of the house, Jor-El ready to head toward the central computer chamber. After promising his wife he would be safe, he left. Looking after him, Nanban had a frown cross her lips. She sensed an ominous feeling in the pit of her heart. The same one she had when she went on her mission. The one she had before Planet Vegeta's destruction. Biting her lip, she turned around and walked back inside. After dinner and eating a month's worth of meals, she placed the tired Naruto to bed. Walking up the stair, she paused a second and peeked into her son's room. She smiled when she saw him sleeping peacefully in his bed, hugging his blanket, the one he was wrapped with when he was born. That was his favorite blanket, always going to sleep with it. Krypto laid in his own bed on the other side of the room, an eye opened when he heard the door open. He always paid close attention to any possible threats to his master and friends. Smiling at the dog, Nanban nodding to him, before leaving. She walked into her and her husband's room, her smile vanishing as she turned serious. Walking to the desk, she looked at what she had been working on and wanted to give to her son on his 8th birthday. It was a custom Saiyan armor. Like a regular Saiyan battle armor, it was stretchy as well as changeable by size to grow with him. The material was made with strong Kryptonian metal, making it unbreakable unless hit with an incredible attack. It was fashioned after her brother Bardock's elite model, having shoulder straps and thigh guards on the sides. It was black and red, with the House of El crest engraved on the front chest. Next to the armor, alongside armored boots, was a strong but light and elastic-tight black long-sleeve shirt. It was fire-resistant and nearly unbreakable. She frowned. She had hoped to present Naruto with his gift on his 8th birthday if, when she corrected herself confidently, he passed a test she would give him. However. Grabbing the equipment, she left her room, going back downstairs and walking into the hallway, entered through a door, showing a set of stairs. Going down, she went into the basement lab Jor-El built. It was where he worked on his studies he brought from the science center. And in the middle of the room was her old Saiyan attack ball, the ship that brought her to her new home. It had been damaged when she landed on Krypton, but was then fixed thanks to Kryptonian scientists. At first, she debated taking it and running off to hunt down the bastard Frieza, but she had grown close to Jor-El and had put it off. Soon, years passed, and the thought of revenge just left her. And she was glad it did, as with her decision came the birth of her precious son. And so, the ship was just left at the basement of the house, only to be used in case of emergency and quick escape from the planet. She then looked to the object next to the attack ball. It was another attack ball, but twice as big, made of grey metal, a blue window, and a large symbol of the House of El emblem on the front. Walking toward the ship, she placed a hand on it, feeling the cold metal. This ship was made to make an emergency evacuation of the planet. But unlike the first ship, this one was large enough to hold more than one person. As such, should the situation call for it, her family could escape. That way, Naruto wouldn't have to be sent out alone. She thought with a frown. She had hated it when her race would send out newborn infants alone out to planets. She had been one of the few who had spoken out against it, only to be ignored by the elders. Damn fools. If she could, she would make sure the same thing did not happen to his son. She swore on her mother pride. Just then, one of the house's AI floating computers called a Codex approached her. She had to withhold jumping and destroying the damn thing by instinct. Damn thing still freaked her out. "What is it?" she demanded, turning away from the ship. "Pardon me, mistress." Science Council head, Sulvan, along with his granddaughter, as well as Zor-El, Kala-In-Z, and their daughter are at the entrance. The machine notified. Blinking, Nanban nodded and went back upstairs to allow the families in. "They're getting worse," Sulvan stated more than anything as they entered the living room. Kala and Nanban took the sleeping girls upstairs to Naruto's room to lay them down on his bed, there being enough room for 3 children. Kala frowned in worry. "Will we be okay?" she asked, holding her husband's hand tightly. Zor-El pulled her to his chest, hugging her tightly in comfort. He could feel her shaking, not that he blamed her. Who knew how long it would be before Krypton's destruction? Sulvan gritted his teeth in anger. They should have realized the dangers they were making for themselves. The council should have realized the trouble approaching before it was too late. It was only through their as well as his own, it would seem arrogance that they didn't pay attention to the consequence they brought forth by draining power from the core. He gave a sad sigh. It was his fault as well, so many scientific research many done by taking samples with the core. Messing with it. It was his fault. It was because of him that his planet was on the brink of destruction. He frowned. His sins were he cause of this. Is there any hope? He muttered, but the others heard him quite clearly. Nanban bit her lip. A thought came to her, but should she do it? There might be. She said, making the others look at her in confusion. What do you mean? Kala asked hopeful. Nanban sighed, running a hand through her mane of hair. There's a ship. She said. At the bottom of the house, the basement. Jor-El and I made it so that in case of emergency, we could use it to take our family and evacuate. Sulvan frowned at her. And what about us? Were you really going to leave us here to die? He argued. Nanban growled at him. Old fool. Her family's safety came first and foremost. Zor-El stepped up before a fight could break out. Alright, that's enough, Sulvan. He told the old man, who just looked away with a huff. Zor-El then looked at Nanban. Do you think the ship will be able to get us out of Krypton? He asked. Sighing, Nanban shook her head, lowering the adult's hope. The ship was only had enough part to make enough space for me, Jor-El, Naruto, and maybe even Crypto. It won't hold all of use. 5 people at best. She said. Everyone looked down. But, Kala started, biting her bottom lip. Can it hold the children? She asked. Everyone looked at her in confusion, surprise, and shock. Kala, what are you saying? Sulvan asked. Our home is dying, and who knows how long we have left. I'm scared. Very much so, but even more at the thought of my precious Kara dying at such a young age. Never being able to truly experience the wonders of life. And I know you all felt the same. Nanban and Sulvan looked down. Why should our children and grandchild suffer such a fate when there is a chance for them to live on? Nanban narrowed her eyes, realizing where the blonde mother was going. You want me to put the children on the ship and send them off, saving them? Kala nodded. Sulvan sighed, running a hand through his grey hair back. He didn't know what to feel. Lara was all he had left. It crushed him to think of never seeing her again, but her safety was his only concern. I agree. Nanban bit her lip before nodding. Are there anything you wish for them to take? Keep it light. Sulvan and I will prepare the ship. She ordered. But Jor-El. Jor-El was not having a good time. Quite the opposite, after getting to Brainiac's central server, he tried to get into the AI system to find out why the machine continued to lie to everyone. Unfortunately, it was not easy, as he was locked out by Brainiac. That only served to raise his suspicion. And so, he headed down to the center of it all, the main brain. After having to break down the door, he walked in to confront Brainiac. And what he discovered shocked him. Brainiac did know the Krypton's upcoming destruction, but didn't warn anyone because it was preparing to save itself. It was downloading its memory into a satellite, which it will be launched out before the planet exploded. I must preserve my existence, Jor-El. After all, am I not the repository of all Kryptonian knowledge? That knowledge will mean nothing if there isn't any more Kryptonians, Jor-El argued. Knowledge is power and all that is. It matters not if someone sees it, only that the information is preserved. Jor-El glared at the computer. You would allow all of Krypton, its very race, become extinct just to save some phantom information instead of helping us survive. You're flawed. Your race is flawed. Your wars in past prove it. Come, Jor-El. At least with your knowledge preserved, you can still keep some dignity. All its wonders, its culture and glory will be safely kept. If the council knew Krypton was doomed, they would frantically put me to work on calculating an evacuation plan. A futile gesture, as it is already too late. The man gritted his teeth, raising his gun and pointing at the computer. You self-righteous bastard. He cursed. Temper, Jor-El. Is this really the time for such emotions? especially when time is short? Brainiac asked. Gritting his teeth in anger, Jor-El lowered his pistol. How long? How long until it happens? He asked, knowing Brainiac know what he was talking about. How long until Krypton's destruction? Hours. Brainiac answered, making Jor-El lower his head sadly. This planet has seen its last sunrise. Jor-El looked down, clenching his hands in anger. Damn it. This couldn't be it. There had to be some other way, some hope to keep the life of Krypton alive. He couldn't allow the only thing left of his home be this sick and cruel machine. He thought about his family. His loving but scary wife. His precious son, Naruto, playing in the backyard with Krypto, or training or sitting under a tree reading his books. He narrowed his eyes. No, he couldn't give up. He had to keep on fighting. He then remembered the ship under the house. Yes. There might just be a way to keep the memory of Krypton alive. Nodding in determination, he approached the computer and began typing key codes in. What are you doing, Jor-El? Nothing you do will be able to stop me from downloading myself. Any attempts to stop me is futile. That may be, Brainiac. But I will not let you or your corrupted programming be the only thing left of Krypton. He stated as he typed away. On the council, in what looked like a small pool of liquid metal, the metal began to shift before the liquid sank, leaving only a long cylinder shaped like the House of El's shield. What is the meaning of this, Jor-El? Brainiac demanded. Jor-El looked at the monitor with a glare. My wife was right. You really can't trust a talking machine. He said, grabbing the cylinder and began to walk away. He had plans that he needed to begin as soon as possible. Jor-El. Jor-El. He ignored the calls of the monster of a machine. Brainiac wasn't important right now. The safety of his family was. Suddenly, the ground shook, forcing Jor-El to grab onto something to balance himself. The shaking was quick to soon end. He narrowed his eyes. That quick ended much sooner than the other ones. What's going on? He could practically hear the amused tone in Brainiac's electronic voice. Another example of human error. He looked at the monitor in confusion and suspicion. Suddenly, he heard the steps of guards enter the room. Freeze. Turning, he saw two armed guards, pointing their pistols at him. Jor-El. What are you doing here? We're under sudden attack from traitorous armies and got an alert from Brainiac. Jor-El's eyes widened. An attack? How could this be? Who would betray their people in such a time? His eyes then widened as he recalled the words of Zod. If our race is to survive, the council must be eliminated. Jor-El's eyes widened at what the man was planning. You plan to kill the council, are you mad? If the council won't take charge for the prosperity of Krypton, they are useless. Zod stated. Jor-El glared at the man. You are talking about war, Zod. Right when Krypton is in its last day. It's madness. But Zod would not stand down as he matched Jor-El's glare. No, not a war, with time so short. A rebellion. We must take every precaution we can to ensure our race's survival. He gritted his teeth in anger. Zod, just what madness are you doing? Jor-El is a traitor. Arrest him. Brainiac ordered. The guards looked at each other in shock. Jor-El was presumed to be a loyal scientist, so to think of him as a traitor was shocking. Jor-El cursed, figuring out Brainiac's plan to make him appear to be the enemy. Having no other choice, he charged at the two guards, pushing them away to the floor as he made his escape. The guards following him outside, only to see him take of their hover vehicles. He's escaping. After him. They chased after Jor-El, firing at his hovercraft, managing to get a hit and damage the craft's end. Cursing, he tried to keep his vehicle as steady as possible as he flew through the corridors. Another blast hit the back, causing the vehicle to go out of control. Gritting his teeth, Jor-El needed to react quickly as the craft headed toward a pillar. The vehicle crashed with a boom as the guards approached. Looking at the wreckage, they didn't see any sign of Jor-El. Where is he? Where did he go? In another section, with guards running around, Jor-El peeked from a corner, ducking back behind cover as guards passed by. He had managed to jump out of his craft in time and was now trying to make it out in one piece. He felt the ground tremble. Looking around, he saw the coast was clear and moved on. Turning a corner, he bumped into a guard. Eye widening, Jor-El reacted fast and punched the man out before he could call for backup. Sorry pal, no hard feelings. Taking the guard's gun, he ran off. He was soon able to make it out of the building, only for his eyes to widen when he saw it was war outside. Ships and crafts exploding and firing all around. Damn it, Zod. He cursed the arrogant fool. Looking around, he spotted a communication pod. Getting to it, he commanded. Get me Nanban. The liquid metal shifted before the face of his wife appeared. Jor-El. What the hell is going on? Zod's gone mad. He's leading a rebellion against the council. Nanban cursed. The fool's constant desire for power is making the situation even worse than it already is. Nanban, Brainiac is downloading its memory to a satellite. It's going to abandon Krypton and leave us for dead. I have a plan, we just Nanban cut him off. Jor-El. Listen, I had spoken with Sulvan, Zor-El and Kala. Jor-El raised a brow as Nanban bit her lip. We have decided to put focus on the safety of the children and put them on the escape ship. Jor-El's eyes widened as he realized where his wife was going. We have to make sure they survive, so we are going to send them off. Jor-El was silent, looking down. How could this happen? For Brainiac betrayed them. Then Zod rebelled against the council, declaring civil war. And now, the young children his son were going to be sent off alone, damn it. He cursed through clenched teeth in anger. He felt so powerless. Jor-El. Nanban trailed off. He sighed, rubbing a hand down his face, brushing off the tears of sadness building up in his eyes. He nodded. Alright. I'll try to get home as fast as I can, just need to get something. Try to keep everyone safe till then. He said. Nanban nodded with a narrowed-eyed look. It was time to show these Kryptonians the power of a Saiyan. The transmission ending, Jor-El heard a familiar roar. Looking up at the sky, he spotted a four-winged beast. Raka. He called to his trusted beast. The beast landing, he patted it on the head. Good to see you, dear girl. He muttered, getting on the saddle. Let's go. With a ha. They flew off, heading through the mess firestorm of missiles and bullets. Dodging left and right. They flew fast, heading toward a highly secured place. The Kryptonian growth chamber. Since the front entrance would no doubt be highly secured with guards and Zod's men, Jor-El would have to use the back entrance. Flying over one of the pools, Jor-El took off his armor as a Codex pod floating beside him. Can you see the Codex? He asked. It's just beneath the central hub. But I'm compelled to warn you, breaching the Genesis chamber is a Class B crime. Punishable. Jor-El cut the machine off. Nobody cared anymore, Codex. The world is about to come to an end. I will not allow a madman like Zod get his hands on the Codex. Not when there's hope. Standing up on the saddle, he leaped over and dived into the pool, swimming deeper. Swimming in, he made it to the growth chamber. All around him were newborn Kryptonian embryos, grown and monitored by nanobots. Ignoring them, he swam up until he broke through the chamber pool's surface. He made it to the Genesis chamber. Looking up, he saw the Codex floating in the center between vines, channeling its energy. The Codex was a skull. A skull belonging to a Kryptonian ancestor, a founder of their race. Reaching up, he grabbed the skull. He looked at it. This, along with you, Naruto, is the legacy of our race. Just then, the alarms went off. Knowing he had limited time, he dived back down, heading to an exit. Finding one, he climbed out of the pool. Unknown to him, a security ship appeared behind him. Jor-El, by the authority of General Zod, surrendered the Codex. Standing up, Jor-El glared at the machine. Glancing back, he saw that Ace stood at the edge, a long way from the ground. Looking back at the ship, he smirked. I don't think so. As the ship fired at where he stood, Jor-El jumped off, falling down the side of the tower. Luckily, he was caught by Raka. Ships of Zod's coup d'etat chased after him, firing at the flying beast. The scientist and beast maneuvered around, dodging fire and used falling ships as cover. Ducking under an exploding ship, Raka roared as she got injured. Curing, Jor-El looked behind him to see one ship following them. Come girl, you can do it. Looking ahead, he saw his home approaching. Almost there. Behind him, the ship locked its targeting on Raka. However, before it could fire, a large blast of energy struck it, destroying the ship with a blast. Seeing this, Jor-El looked up and saw his wife lying next to him, smirking at it. What would you do without me? She teased, making him crack a smirk as Nanban helped the injured Raka to the L house. With a safe landing, the two went inside, heading down to the basement. There, Jor-El saw his brother and sister-in-law and Sulvan. The old scientist saw him. Jor-El. He then saw what the man had in his grasp. What are you thinking? He demanded. Not in the mood for the old man's words, Jor-El glared at him, taking Sulvan by surprise. Now is not the time for your arguments, Sulvan. He said and approached his desk. He looked at Nanban. Where's Naruto? Nanban frowned and looked aside. Following her gaze, he saw the children peacefully sleeping on the couch. Krypto was with them, standing guard over them. Frowning at that was to come, he walked over. Kneeling at his son's side, he softly ran a hand through his dark hair. Smiling a tearful smile, he placed a gentle kiss on his son's forehead. Forgive this foolish man for what I am about to place upon you, my son. Gently scooping him up in his arm, Jor-El walked over to a platform. Carefully laying his son on it, he held the skull overhead, between contraptions. Walking toward the controls, he started the machine. Zor-El walked to stand beside his brother. What are you doing, Jor-El? He asked as he saw the skull beginning to disintegrate. Ensuring the survival of our race. Jor-El said. I am bonding the Codex's genetic information into Naruto's cells. Through his cells, his blood, the legacy of Krypton lives on. Why do that? Kala asked. So that any child he has, or anyone he trusts, they shall be either Saiyan or Kryptonian. He said. He then looked at Nanban. Did you find a world? He asked. Nanban asked. Yes. A world where his only other living family resides in. She walked to the computer and brought up the planet. In my last transmission with my brother, he managed to send the coordinates of the planet his son Naruto's cousin Kakarot was sent to. Jor-El walked over, looking at the information of the planet. Earth, they have a yellow sun. And it's young. He said, reading the states. Is that important? Sullivan asked, confused. Jor-El nodded. Very. And not just for Naruto, but also for Kara and Lara. Their Kryptonian cells will drink its radiation, enhancing them greatly. And their race. Like us, a seemingly intelligent population, is centuries behind our own evolution. Ala frowned, walking over to her daughter, gently brushing a bang to the side. They'll be outcasts. She said. Jor-El frowned and shook his head. They'll be safe. They will be gods to them. They will also have each other. He walked to the machine and started it. A blue beam of light shot down from the machine, hitting Naruto's chest. After a minute, they stopped. Just then, an alarm sounded. What's going on? Sullivan questioned. A Kelex approached them. 5 attack ships converging from the east. Jor-El frowned. Zod. Nanban growled, the hairs on her tail standing on end. I'll handle him. It was night out and the moons were full, so she was able to turn into her grade 8 form. Jor-El placed a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. He shook his head. No, don't waste your energy on that fool. We have much more important things to take care of. Nanban frowned as everyone turned to the ship. Opening the door to the pod, Jor-El looked at everyone. Nanban, Zor-El and Kala and Sullivan looked at their child and grandchild in their arms respectfully. Taking their last and final moment to look at them. Frowning, Jor-El walked over to his wife and sleeping son, Krypto sitting beside them whining. Nanban gave a teary smile as she massaged Naruto's face with her tail. When Planet Vegeta exploded, I thought I was going to be the last living Saiyan. My young nephew being who knows where. But when Naruto was born, it was the happiest day of my life. She swallowed a sob. She thought back to the times she played with the young brat, how she trained him, and when he first was able to punch her in the cheek. She was so proud. I wanted to train him until he was the strongest in the universe. To fight battles with him, like a Saiyan family does. Jor-El smiled softly as he wrapped an arm around her, pulling the two closer. He better not stop training, or else I'll come back from the dead and kick his ass. She said, tears running down her cheek. Jor-El gave a sobbing chuckle, knowing his wife would truly do that. Nanban placed a gentle kiss on her son's head. Naruto, Naruel. I wish I didn't have to send you out alone, like other Saiyan children. I wish I could come with you, but I need to stay back and watch out for your nerd of a father. Jor-El chuckled at the nickname. Just promise me that you will train every day to continue to push yourself to the limit and beyond. To train with all your Saiyan pride until you are the strongest. Just make sure not to train all night. You need your rest after all. And eat healthy. And make sure to keep Lara and your cousin safe. You're a man, so be sure to protect them. Tears fell non-stop, but she didn't care, just staring at her son's beautiful face. I love you, my little warrior. Jor-El kissed the top of his wife's head, holding her as she cried. He then looked at his son, gently rubbing a finger on his cheek. My son, there will be many hardships in life. Many threats, but I know you will be able to push through them. You have your mother's temper and scary strength, and I'm not talking about your Saiyan blood. Nanban chuckled at that. You also have my intelligence and determination, as well as our combined will to never give up. With both smarts and strength, you will be a force to be reckoned with. You will travel far, my little Naruel. You will travel to a place where many things are different. You will meet people that might not know what you are and may even come to fear you. But I know you will make friends you can trust. Live amongst the people, Naruto. Learn from them, adapt. Discover where your strength and your power are needed. Always hold in your heart the pride of your special heritage. I know you will be scared. You will be different. Sometimes, you will feel like an outcast, but you will never be alone. And we will never leave you even in the face of our deaths. As your father, allow me to give you my final words, my son. You will make my strength your own. You will see my life through your eyes, as your life will be seen through mine. The son becomes the father, and the father becomes the son. You are destined for great things, Naruto. You are a son of Krypton, just as much as you are a son of Saiyans. A son of two opposite races, one of might and one of smarts. Your existence will change people, many for the better. I know it. Live well, my son, and never forget. Your mother and I will always live on in your heart. The two placing one last kiss on their son's head, they placed him on the seat of the ship, along with Kara and Lara. Crypto also climbed inside as the adults placed precious possessions of the children or memorable objects to remember their families by inside the cockpit. Lastly, Nanban stepped up, placing the armor she made for her son set at their feet and covered the three in a long blanket. The same one Naruto was wrapped in at his birth. Everyone stepped back as the door closed and the ship began to float up, systems starting up. "We love you." Outside the house, leading his army, Zod looked up and watched a ship launch out of the house. "Blast that ship," he commanded. His ships fired, trying to take it down. However, it was too late as the ship managed to break the planet's atmosphere and leave the planet. Zod gritted his teeth in anger. Looking down, he blinked when suddenly he was met with a fist to the face. The strike sent him flying back and crashing hard on the side of his ship. Groaning, he tried to ignore the pain of his broken nose and looked up. He saw a grinning but obviously angry Nanban standing there, cracking her knuckles. "Hey bitch, did that hurt?" She mocked as Jor-El Dek in a Kryptonian battle armor stood next to her. But the snarl, Zod ordered his troops to attack. Narrowing their eyes, the husband and wife of the House of El charged back. Both sides fought hard, but soon it was ended as the female Saiyan moved too fast for the troops and her strength sent them flying. Jor-El and Zod fought blade to blade, the general believing to hold advantage against the scientist. However, said scientist was also taught combat by the order of his Saiyan wife, so he easily held his own. Soon, council soldiers were able to appear and struck down the traitors, taking them by surprise. The Battle of Krypton was over. Not that it would mean much. At the council chamber, Zod and his troops were put on trial. Standing in front of the council, as well as Jor-El and Nanba, the traitors of Krypton stood bound and weaponless. The council read their sentence, but Zod didn't pay the old fools any attention, only glaring at the stone-faced Jor-El. Zod spoke. "The Codex," he said, making the council go silent. "Where have you taken it?" Jor-El knew all eyes were on him, but didn't break stare from Zod. "Away from your reach," he replied. Zod narrowed his eyes at him. "Your son?" Nanban growled at him, but feeling Jor-El grab her hand, she didn't make any action. Jor-El glared at his former friend. "His name is Naruto. Son of the House of El. And the legacy of Krypton." Zod growled at the two. "General Zod." The head councilman spoke, standing up. "For the crimes of murder and high treason, the council has sentenced you and your fellow insurgents to 300 cycles of somatic reconditioning. Do you have any last words?" Zod glared at Jor-El and Nanban before turning his glare to the council. "You fools. You are all nothing but fool. You won't kill us yourselves." He had to be held back by guards as he advanced to them. "You wouldn't sully your hands. But you'll damn us to a black hole for eternity." He was pushed back before he looked at Jor-El. "You were right, Jor-El. This is Krypton's final hour. Nothing would change that. But don't believe your son is safe. I will find him. I will find him. I will reclaim what you have taken from us." He was pushed to the center with his troops. "Mark my words, Jor-El. I will find your son. There is no place in the universe I won't look for him." Their legs began to be encased in ice, moving upwards. The troops began to groan in pain as they were encased in ice. Zod continued to glare at the two, gritting his teeth. "I will find him." He shouted one last time before he was encased completely. Nanban glared at the cocoon that held Zod before the pods were launched up into the massive ship above them, which would take them to the eternal prison, the Phantom Zone. Jor-El closed his eyes. He could feel the ground softly shaking beneath his feet. The rumbling growing larger by the second. Placing a hand on his wife's back, he led them away, shooting one last glare at the large screen of Brainiac. But that didn't matter now. He just wanted to spend his last hour with his wife. It came faster than anyone knew. In a blink of an eye, leaving everyone unprepared. The ground shook and quaked. Breaking apart like paper and either raising or lowering. Buildings tumbled down, breaking and taking people. Pillars of magma and fire shooting out of the ground. People panicked, screaming. Women and children crying, men wailing, and animals roaring. The council, in a moment of hope, begged help from Brainiac. Only to be betrayed by their only assistants as the artificial intelligence had given its last farewell, its data and mind downloaded into a small satellite above the dying planet before shooting off into the deep space. In the House of El, sitting in the couch, Nanban laid her head on Jor-El's shoulder, an arm wrapped protectively around her shoulder. They faced the window, gazing upon their incoming deaths, but they didn't care. In Nanban's grasp was a photo frame. One taken on their most important day. Jor-El smiling at the camera, an arm wrapped around an exhausted but incredibly happy Nanban. The Saiyan woman not looking at the camera, only smiling down at the giggling face of their newborn son. Their precious Naruto. Nanban smiled, leaning deeper into her husband's hold. They didn't run from death because they were happy. They were happy to be with one another. They were happy to know their son was safe. Closing their eyes, a final tear running down their cheeks, the fire bursted through and wrapped around them. With a mighty blast, the planet of Krypton exploded with a fiery blast. Far away from the destroyed planet, a lone ship sailed the stars. And in the ship, wrapped in a comforting warmth of two young girls and his beloved dog, Naruto slept. But as he slept, a single tear escaped his closed eyes. What if Naruto has Frieza and Goku potential in Dragon Ball? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.